Ryan says, do you think the other countries that have accumulated in secret will now show their holdings? What are the incentives here? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a great question. I do. That's the rumor that I've heard, and I have absolutely no way of verifying this myself. But that is the rumor that I heard, is that the Saudis, like the UAE, they were planning to make their announcement at their conference in December, but they ended up, I don't know if they got cold feet or got spooked or whatever, but I think they wanted to let the US go first. That was kind of the idea there. So I do think, based on that, if that's true, then yes, I do think that the other countries will come out. There's so many things to think about here. And I saw something on, I think it was Twitter today, I think, basically said that the US, according to AI's calculations and models, can accumulate about 200,000 Bitcoin over the next 5 years without moving the price. So I don't know what they factor into that. Do they factor in the UAE? Do they factor in Russia? Do they factor in China? I mean, you look at this very objectively and you say, okay, for the last couple of years here, before demand has really peaked or even came close to peaking here, there's been about 200 million Bitcoin floating around on the exchanges, available Bitcoin. That's kind of been the average. It's gone higher, it's gone lower. That's what they tell us is available. I would still like to see proof of reserves become the standard. But if you just think about that and you say, okay, there's 2 million Bitcoin available on average at any given moment, before the countries, before the public companies, before AI. So think about what's going to come here. Let's say that America gets, even if they drive up the price, let's say they get 500,000 best case. I think they're absolutely dreaming to think that they're going to get to 1 million. But let's say they get to 500,000. China probably wants the same. Russia probably wants the same. The UAE probably wants the same. So those 4 countries alone, if they all have about the same Bitcoin, that means the supply of Bitcoin's gone. No other country, no other company, no other state pension fund, no other person, no other AI is going to be able to get Bitcoin from that. Like, when you really just stop and do the math on this, it's crazy. As soon as you have countries involved in this, that's when shit gets crazy. So we talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show, where we said Saylor has been talking about this for 3 years. He said that when these 3 things happen, everything's off the table. Bitcoin's going to absolutely rip. And those 3 things were the Bitcoin ETF, which came out last January. Bitcoin ETF, Wall Street being able to buy direct Bitcoin or hold Bitcoin through an ETF. Second one was the FASB rules, the accounting rules changing for where you can actually value your Bitcoin at the fair market value. Crazy concept, right? But for up until then, they had to measure it basically at its lowest point. So it didn't make any sense. There was no incentives for public companies to hold Bitcoin because of the accounting rules. So that changed. So that's 2 of 2 of 3. And then the third one was that banks are able to custody Bitcoin. So when the big banks are actually able to hold Bitcoin on behalf of their clients, he said when those 3 things happen, we're gone. And all 3 things happened. When Trump was inaugurated, they repealed that, what was it, SAB 120, something like that. So the banks are now able to hold Bitcoin. So you have countries now holding and buying Bitcoin. You have those 3 things that Saylor's been talking about for the last couple of years have happened. And we're at the point in the Bitcoin cycle now where we usually just go up anyways. Like the last time in this part of the cycle 4 years ago, I think we went from like 6,000 to 60,000 in a couple months at this time. So when I'm not going to say it. I made a prediction a couple weeks ago. It looked like it was never going to happen. But all of a sudden, old George's not looking so crazy right now. Who knows? When Bitcoin moves, it goes so fast. And it doesn't happen often. And most people have never really experienced that until the time comes 4 years later. But when this thing really starts moving, there's no stopping it. And that was before all this was in play here.